Alright, so I'm going to try to give a very quick and dirty explainer of some ambient piano music for somebody on Reddit who asked, I don't know their theory background. They gave me an example. I'm just going to kind of aim this at them and talk through some of these basic ideas. So the example that I was given is in the key of G. So we are going to work from the key of G. So you need to know your G major scale. And it's useful to be able to think in terms of scale degree numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1. Realistically, it's most useful if you can do this in any key, because as we get a little more into additions and extensions to chords, I'll be talking in scale degree numbers of those chords, not of the scale. So it's a little complicated, but it helps long term if you're able to think any scale degree number for any key. So first let's build a triad. So in the key of G, we'll start here with 1, 3, 5. That is our one chord in this key. And then if you're playing all notes that are in the key, that's what's called diatonic. So only those notes, those are diatonic. All these other notes, those are not diatonic. So you also have diatonic triads. I guess I'll walk through those really quickly. So if I just kept that same shape, and I'm playing up through the scale, so I have the 1 chord, the 2 chord, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, which you won't use very much. That's actually one to almost avoid for this style of music. And they have their different qualities. Your 1 chord is major, 2 is minor, 3 is minor, 4 is major, 5 is major. Sometimes you hear it called dominant. That's when they add the dominant 7. We're really not going to do that here. It doesn't fit in the style. And your 6th chord is minor, and then your 7 is diminished. Once again, we're not really using the 7. Okay. So the big thing that's going on here is we are going between the 1 chord and the 4 chord. So 1 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord, 4 chord. And the thing to understand is that it doesn't matter like what you're doing. It's still the 1 chord. No matter where I play this, that's all. It's still the 1 chord. Any kind of weird voicing I do, whatever I do, it's still the 1 chord. Even if I change the inversion by putting a lower note in the bottom, it's still the 1 chord. It's still the 1 chord. And the same thing with C. So that's still your 4 chord. Now, you could improvise using the 1 and the 4 chord. And you could stick to scale degrees, to chord tones, I guess is the word I should use. Chord tones, so I could just be playing. It's kind of boring sounding, right? The thing that gives this ambient kind of music, like you gave me an example of, its quality, is mostly adding 2s. You might want to Google new age music, new age piano. You'll probably find a lot of stuff like that. There was a man, I can't remember the name of the composer and pianist who did that, who really kind of made the new age piano thing a thing. And you could find more of that kind of music. But the thing is, you can just improvise this. So the 2, getting back to my point, the 2 is important here. So from here, got my G, right? And for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to have to explain some more left-hand stuff here in a second. But I'll be using a lot of 1, 5, 1. It sort of just outlines that chord, and you're missing the 3, so you don't actually have the quality of the chord. But the thing is, once you establish a key, and especially as you're rocking like between here and here, here and here, your ear starts to fill in the gaps. Like as soon as you start playing notes, like now my ear kind of knows what key I'm in, and it fills in those thirds for you. You don't have to have all the notes all the time. So that's kind of important to know. So anyway, I'm going to do a lot of 1, 5, 1 over here in my left hand. So the 2, that is what gives this all this sound. And sometimes you'll hear it called the add 9. So if I went from here up to there, that's a 9th, and that would be the 9th of this chord. it's an add 9 chord because if it was a 9 chord of some sort, it would be like the G major 9 would be that, and that includes this note, the 7th. Since I'm not including the 7th, it's just an add 9 chord. So this is an add 9 chord. And a lot of times a really nice way to voice it is this really tight, crunchy voicing down here. Gives a lot of character to it. But you can make it much spacier by putting it somewhere else. Like, anyway, so in the example that you gave, there was actually kind of an ostinato going on. Right. I think it was a little slower than this, but just to explain quickly, I'm going to play a little faster. So that's kind of cool. And it's mostly just playing off this. You've got 2, 3, 5, 2, 3, 5, 2, 3, 5 in your key of G. And the thing that's nice about going from 1 to 5 or 1 to 4 is that 4 doesn't establish your tonality really strongly. What makes you feel established in a tonality is something like let's see. So if I'll talk about these here in a second. You really want to go somewhere, don't you? Like your ear wants to land right there. But with 1 and 4, it's a lot flowier, and you don't really feel that. There's a little draw from 4 to 1, but it's not nearly as strong as 5 to 1. So it gives this much freer sound. So staying away from strong 5 to 1 relationships helps you keep this airy feel for this style of music. We'll talk about some other chord progressions here in a second, and you can use 5, but I would say while 5 is really good for general improvisatory piano, if you want this light airy sound, actually avoiding 5 is really good because then it creates less of a strong pull and it keeps you, whatever. Okay, so back to what I was talking about. So this 2, 3, 5, 2, 3, 5 thing going on, and you walk down to the 4 chord, and now this becomes 6, 7, 2. So you still got the 2, it's right there. And it's nice that with this kind of pattern, you hear this specific combination of notes all the time when you're walking in between a 1 and a 4 for ambient type of music, because it works over both of those chords and gives them a certain quality. This actually happens a lot in smooth jazz. Also has a lot of this going on, where you have these open voicings that work over multiple chords, but they are different parts of that chord, but you're using the same upper structure. Also, because I'm kind of talking about jazz, let's talk about lo-fi hip-hop real quick. I'll change sounds. Lo-fi hip-hop is kind of the same thing. Now, it's going to sound a little empty because I don't have drums and all that stuff. But lo-fi hip-hop, you basically are doing this, but you're doing the 1. You're usually using the 7 and the 9 in there. So you do make it the full chord. So you got 1 through 5, and then 7 and then 9. Then you do the same thing right there. So it doesn't have to have the 9. Like once you get into jazz, it doesn't matter. You can have that. So I'd probably voice it something like that. So a lot of times in lo-fi hip hop, you're going to hear things like that. Let's see, what would I do? Okay, let's not. That is something I'll talk about here in a second about repetition, legitimizing. I was not ready for that, but no, just don't step into it too much. As long as you keep to the notes in the key, you're good to go, right? But you can kind of see where we're going with that with the lo-fi hip hop. It's that same idea, and man, like, go find some lo-fi hip hop. You'll find out that it's basically the 1 and the 4 chord all day long, with almost no variation. Okay, so back to piano. There are some things that you can do to add. Before I get there. Other notes work too. So we got the 2. We're really leaning on that 2. The 4 is good too. It's a little bit of a stronger resolution, so you might not want to lean into using 4/3 suspensions as much. I might talk about that a little more here in a second. But the other thing you can do is just notes in the key. And I think later in the tune that you gave me an example of, you hear this thing. Where you walk down to the 7. I I don't know if it actually hangs on to it, but basically you can resolve a couple of different ways. So you're hanging on this tension. That's the kind of the point, is that you want to hang on to some tension. Now I could hang on to it like that, or I could resolve it right on the downbeat. Right? I could resolve up. But basically, just as long as you're keeping within the key for this style, you can get away with whatever you want. You just hang on those tensions a little longer. So if you're improvising, and let's see if I land on something that doesn't quite work as well. You don't quite like that sound, right? That 6 doesn't sound as good. Keep playing it. Oh, it works there, and it doesn't work as well there. But then you can eventually resolve it. So like Adam Neely talks about, repetition legitimizes. It's super true. Like you can justify a mistake very easily by just keeping on playing it. So if you land on something that's not quite there, it's not quite as exciting, you don't like it, you can make that work. Now, earlier when I was completely fucking up doing whatever lo-fi hip-hop thing I was doing, I was too busy talking. But no, I could have just really leaned into that note. It's a non-diatonic note. That's why it really stuck out weird. But when you have thicker harmonies, you can get away a lot with non-diatonic notes. I think it was that. So like I'm playing in the key of G. Let's see. You could hang on to it and find ways to fix it. So that's what I'm saying. But if you're keeping to diatonic stuff, you're really good. Like you can just, it's fine. You'll fix it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about, I guess, some left hand things that I was doing, some other things. So like I said earlier on, a lot of 1-5-1. That's a really easy pattern. You could extend that if you want to have a little more space. So 1-5-1-3-5. It's a really cool thing to do. It's a little harder because you have to be a little more technically adept to be able to do that. Another really good one for this particular style is 1-5-1-2-3, and then you have a little more freedom in your right hand. So those are just some things you can play in your left hand. Now in your right hand, some things that you can do is add some thirds. So just thirds wherever. That sounds really boring because I'm playing just thirds, kind of like a scale. And I'm going to do the same thing here with sixth. And that works. Now you're just not going to play a lot like that. You're probably going to mix them into some like melodic content. Right. Okay, so that's real easy, rocking between 1 and 4. The tune you had other chords, so it had some other chords. So let's talk about some of the other chords, not necessarily from that example, but just other chords, other diatonic chords that are useful. So that's going to be 6 and 5. We're already using 1 and 4. So let's stay in the key of G. So here's our 1 chord, here's our 6 chord, here's our 4 chord, there's our 5 chord, which, like I said, probably not the best for this ambient music, but we'll talk about it because it's useful for just general improv. Okay. And that's kind of a doo-wop progression. You can do that same thing and lean into the 2s on all of these notes. Sorry, right, that's the 2 there. The 2 there. I didn't play this one, but yeah. If you sit, I mean, it sounds okay, but like at some point, like it becomes very predictable. It's like, oh, he's like really nailing that 2 and then going up to the 3 for every one of those. But you can lean into that for all of that. Another progression using the same chords, just go to 5. That's the Axis of Awesome 4 chords, whatever. It's in every like pop song. Like on the planet. So do the same thing there. Right, so you get the idea. But adding those 2s or add 9s, whatever you want to call them, that little bit of like tension that's not too tense really lends itself to this style. So those are some chords. Another thing that I noticed at some point in the example you gave is that I think he was hanging out on the 4 chord and then walked down. This is the 1 chord, but it's in first inversion. So keeping that B there and then just walking. So I'm keeping that. So if I'm on the 4 chord, I've got 1 5 1. Then I'm doing this. This is actually 3 1 3 for the 1 chord. But I'm keeping that G as a common tone between those chords, and then I'm walking down to the 6th chord. So that's, you can always use those kind of passing things. Something that's probably more common in like pop music is you're not on the 4 chord walking down, you're on the 1 chord. That's the 5 chord in this case. Walking down. Did I say the 6 chord earlier? I meant the 2 chord. So you're walking from the 4, 1, 2, 1. But yeah, in pop progressions, where you are leaning more on the 5 than you do with ambient piano, you walk through the 5 and then down to the 6. Yeah, that's where you walk to the 6 and then to the 5. Again, you hear that a lot. So yeah, staying away from things that are going to really strongly like bias your key, like the 5 chord works, leaning really heavily into the 2, and just sticking to diatonic stuff. And if you run into like things that have a little bit of tension, fine, lean into it and then resolve it later because you can. And that's basically ambient piano. And then like people are just like, oh my God, you're so awesome at piano. And you can sit and have a conversation while you're playing this stuff and people just think you're amazing, but it's actually not that difficult. There's just a few little technical hurdles and that's kind of all there is. I guess one little extra thing is that piece you had strings in it. Now, I don't know if you've got strings. A nice thing if you have an expression pedal. I have one here that I can use with this, so it's kind of nice because then you can swell the strings in and out. Yeah, anyway. But yeah, strings under that ambient stuff work really well. You don't have to have like an expression pedal, so like I could set this probably to light strings and not swell them in and out. It just adds a little bit of extra fun. The thing about using strings or pads also work if you have synth pads, also work really well under this kind of music. The problem is you do need to be a little extra cautious about how you're pedaling, because with piano, let's kill the strings. With piano, once I'm playing these notes, I'm holding them, but they're decaying. So even if I'm just chilling on the pedal, those G's are dead, and they're not going to play this, and it's not too muddy. I'm not going to live on the pedal. You probably still shouldn't, but you could. But as soon as you add strings to the mix, those strings for a lot of keyboards are going to sustain. And if I just keep sustaining through all of that, it gets real muddy real fast, especially if I start walking through all this stuff. Like that's just not going to work. So just something to be aware of. Add strings, add pads, synth pads. They work really well for this kind of stuff, but be careful with your pedal. You don't want things getting muddy. Anyway, I'm sure I left out a million things just trying to do this off the cuff. But hopefully that was useful, and maybe I made it vaguely useful to other people. Sorry, I didn't feel like adding a bunch of visual aids. Maybe I can do a more quality version of this at some point in the future, but I didn't want to quite jump into that heavy of a project. So hopefully this was helpful. Catch you later.